Thank you for the introduction, Sveta. As we have seen over the past half-century, there's been successive waves of development of Asian entertainment. Starting with, in Hong Kong, you had the movies that emanated around the region in the 60s and 70s, with a brief period of global popularity due to Bruce Lee. Then you had the Japanese wave of music and fashion and animation spreading across Asia. Then, of course, in the last decade, you had the Korean wave, which had TV series, music, movies, online gaming, culminating in the recent phenomenon of the Gangnam-style video, which I know many of you probably have seen it. It's probably passed the mark of possibly the most viewed video of all time at around 800 million views. Right. And more importantly, more fascinating is the fact that they have 150,000 copycat videos and also user-generated videos. So, with that said, Grace, do you think that in hindsight we would look back on this moment that Gangnam Style is actually the watershed moment of the arrival of Asian entertainment?
I don't think we could say that it's the arrival of Asian entertainment on the global stage because, like you mentioned, there's been films, there have been music, there's fashion. There's been a lot of Asian influence in pop culture around the world. I think, the Psy phenomenon of 800 million views, of which I probably was responsible for 100,000 of those, is due to the fact of technology. I think technology, specifically the internet, and YouTube in this case, helped to spread what was one piece of content very quickly around the world. And within, I think it's 5 or 6 months since it first debuted, has gone viral in a very strong way. I don't think, it's not the watershed moment, but I think it is a moment in Asian pop culture. And I think because we are now in a global, borderless world, we'll hopefully be able to see more content come out of Asia.
So, Grace, if you look into a crystal ball, what else do you think is next in terms of a phenomenon coming out of Asia?
Well, as mentioned, we already have the movies that, you've seen around the world. Music is obviously playing as well. What I'm hoping for and what I'm working toward is television. I think television is a very powerful platform. It's a very powerful medium. I would love to be able to see a show that's created in Asia, for Asia, but that has the ability to travel. So whether that's a finished television show or perhaps a television format, I'm definitely thinking that's the next trend.
I know many people in the audience probably are not from the industry, so for their benefit, Grace, can you talk a little bit about what a format is?
Sure. So take a show like X Factor or The Voice or American Idol probably is most recognized. It just got loud. Hello? Okay. Is most recognized. American Idol started out as a show in the UK called Pop Idol. And it, as a format, went to the US, which means producers in the States took the concept of the show, localized it, called it American Idol, and the next thing you know, we're over 10 seasons later. I think we're on season 13, 14 right now. And it's a phenomenon that has now spread across the world. So you have Indonesian Idol, you have Italian Idol, Spanish Idol. That's a format that was created in the UK that has now gone around the world. So my hope is that we'll be able to create something here in Asia that was born in Asia, made for Asia, but has the potential to be able to travel like that.
Now can you talk a little bit more about what you do specifically? Right? You talk about formats, so you produce TV shows.
Right.
What does that mean to produce a TV show?
You sound like my mom. She asks me every day the same question. So what I try to do, what we try to do is we take the concept of packaging a television show, which basically means taking an idea from the beginning, being able to bring in a broadcast partner, bringing in third-party financing if necessary, bringing in sponsors, advertisers if that's part of what's needed, and then attaching a talent to it. So the idea is once you've packaged this program from idea all the way to in front of the camera, behind the camera, and the financing, that you'll then be able to work with a broadcaster to be able to get it on air. That's basically, in a nutshell, what producing does. I think you also have to take it a step further and consider if what you're creating has appeal beyond the region here. Again, the idea is you can make a really great show, but is it appealing to the region? Is it appealing to just one market? Will it appeal to somebody in Europe? Those are also the things that you have to take into consideration. It can't just be, oh, it's a fun show, I think it's kind of cool, that's what I want to do. You have to consider sort of the whole context.
Now, it's interesting because a lot of the big U.S. major studios and a lot of other major media companies are also trying to enter this game. They're trying to create formats that travel the world. Of course, a lot of them started off in the UK and Netherlands. Those are the global hubs of formats. And a lot of them are actually starting studios here in Asia or production hubs here. Do you view them as the competition, or do you focus more on the independent competition out there?
No, I don't consider the major studios coming into the market as competition. It's good. We need it. We encourage it. Because I think the industry right now in Asia is still extremely young. We're still trying to figure out what it all means. We're still trying to figure out how to be competitive with the Netherlands and and other European powerhouses that have been able to produce great content, and the U.S. as well. That I think the more players in the industry helps the ecosystem grow. So definitely having the major studios here and trying to figure it out along with the independents, I think, is a very positive step. As far as competition goes, yes, there are definitely a lot of production companies in the region trying to create shows. I think we each have sort of our own approach and own style. I think a lot of the companies focus on bringing in the big brands. So you'll see X Factor, Amazing Race, Next Top Model. And these are huge shows from the States that have a great proven track record. And that'll be great for the market here and great for the industry here in the region. But again, for me and for my company, Keras, we're trying to focus a little bit more on homegrown content. Creating that original idea, the original IP, that if it can be developed here and incubated correctly, then maybe we have a chance to be able to take it beyond Asia as well.
So you mentioned IP. Is that really the barrier to entry, creating that unique IP that nobody else can replicate?
Yeah, there are some barriers to entry, just like in any industry. Creating IP, it's creative business, right? We're a people business. So I would say if you don't like people, that's probably a barrier to entry. This probably isn't the right industry for you. But I think it's, about just being able to connect the dots, understand how the business works. Creativity is something that I think everybody has, and some more creative than others, but it really isn't, we're not like doctors or astrophysicists where it requires a particular high-level degree in order to be able to get into the business or get into the industry. So I think in that sense, the barriers to entry are a little bit different. And, as long as you love what we're doing and love the business, then I think it's a great place to start.
The interesting thing about a lot of the studios looking at Asia, they think about piracy and the lack of protection of IP. Mm-hmm. Now, once you create an idea for a format, how defensible is it really? Because the next player can make a slight tweak
Sure.
and sell that as another format. So right. How do you defend against that?
I think it's about focusing on just creating great content. Content is king. And I think if you look at television right now, how many singing competition shows do you have, right? So instead of 3 judges, you have 4 judges. Instead of sitting in a chair, now you have a chair that spins. So you have these different elements. By the way, it's a great show. Love The Voice. So you have these different elements, but the basics of that concept is it's still a singing competition. So how do you package it? How do you dress it? What are the creative elements that you put into it? I think that's what makes it sort of interesting to see, your take on a singing competition versus mine versus somebody else's is going to be completely different. But then what does the audience want? And again, I think content is king. It's driven so much by what the audience will respond to, what they find relevant, what they find entertaining, what they find to be fun. But, at the end of the day, a singing show is still a singing show.
But how difficult is it to sell a format once you've created it for the initial broadcaster? You package it up as a format, you sell it to another broadcaster, but then they might think, do I build or do I buy? Right?
I see. So, basically you're asking if somebody would just rip it off because it seems
or maybe their brother has the ability to create something similar.
Sure.
But how do you persuade them to buy your format?
I think it's the track record. So
Yeah.
I think if a show has done very well in its first run and there were really high ratings and there's sort of a grassroots buzz and fans like it, the audience likes it, then there's no reason to change something that's not broken.
Right.
And I think that's and that's hard. But I'm trying to think. Yes, you could go through the court system and get lawyers
Right.
and all of that. But I think for the region right now, it's just about continuing to innovate. Be creative, come up with original ideas. If you're going to come up with a singing show, then do something that nobody's seen before rather than just adding a couple of different elements.
I guess it seems that some broadcasters are starting to see the value add of if you can buy a format versus just stealing the idea, there's a secret sauce involved to making it successful. You bring that, they don't have to go through the trials and
Correct.
tribulations of figuring out.
Yeah, and there's a development
sauce.
process,
Yeah.
and just like developing a video game,
Right.
takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Developing a concept for television takes a lot of time as well. It's not something that happens in a week. It's not, that's something that happens in a couple of months. I mean, sometimes it does take an extended period of time, and it'll just click, and I think
Right.
luck and timing have a lot to do with it as well.
Sure.
So, sometimes you may feel like you were first to market, but just didn't work as well, and here comes another guy with another show that's slightly similar.
So earlier you talked about financial modeling for your projects. Now I'm curious, how much emphasis do you put on digital distribution of your content versus, say, a traditional TV broadcaster as a revenue stream? Because I'll say in the U.S. now, there's a growing trend among independent film producers
Right.
to rely more on the digital distribution than on the traditional theatrical distribution to movie theaters. Part of it's out of necessity because the U.S. major studios have blocked off the slots for the theaters.
Right.
But part of it's also they're experimenting with new ways to reach their fans, their consumers. How about you?
I think both are important. I think traditional and digital are both part of the ecosystem and are necessary. I personally feel for Kara's business model here in Asia, we're going to lead with traditional. First of all, the market here in Asia is still extremely fragmented. It's, you have local culture, local tastes, local language that you have to deal with. So if you look at what platform can hit the biggest number of audience at once, television is still it. That doesn't mean that social media is not important. It is. Online platform is extremely important. But it's part of the mix, but I don't think the lead of it. So for us, it's still television because you get the biggest number of eyeballs in one swoop.
Of course, players like YouTube are very vocal about subsidizing content for creation on online video. At what point do you think we'll hit the tipping point where it's interesting for you
Right.
to produce for YouTube first before you think about the broadcaster?
I think it comes down to numbers. I think it comes down to numbers. If you're able to justify financing a program or a piece of content for X amount, are you able to generate that back online? And that's sort of the big question that everybody's trying to answer. Like, we love YouTube and would love to be able to do something with them. I think they're trying to figure out the region right now because it is fragmented, like mentioned, local language, local taste, local culture. But it comes down to the economics. So you can produce, for example, a $2 million show for regional television, and that's pretty par for the course, and all the partners involved will walk away happy. But can you justify that on an online platform today and be able to have some sort of return? I think it's going to take some time, but we're going to definitely get there. I mean, for sure, it's definitely going to get there.
Now, of course, Korea has been on a lot of people's minds because of this video.
Yes.
But what other countries in Asia are starting to bubble up in terms of activity and in filmed entertainment?
I love what's going on in Southeast Asia. I think it's very exciting when you look at population numbers and the trends in advertising. Southeast Asia's got a lot of going on, specifically Indonesia. I think, the population there is, 250, give or take, 250 million, which is almost the size of the United States. Mm-hmm. So if you sort of put it in that context, there's going to be some exciting things, I think, coming out of that market. The Philippines, great as well, and very vibrant. Their pop culture is a lot of fun. Music scene is great. So I think you'll start to see a lot happening in Southeast Asia. Japan's always taken the lead, I think, in selling formats. So shows like Hole in the Wall, which you might have seen, or Takeshi's Castle, Silent Library. These are shows that have been around for a bit, and they've all come from Japan.
Interestingly enough, I heard Wipeout, even though it seems like it was a Japanese show, was actually, an Endemol format?
Correct. It was a format that was created not in Japan, oddly enough, and there were some legal wranglings, but I think they got it.
When do you think China, being the world's #2 economy and most populous nation, with a wealth of stories in its history, when do you think they'll finally be able to step up to the global exporting stage? Obviously they had their beautiful art house films in the 80s with Gong Li, directed by Zhang Ziyi. You had the arrival of a few Chinese stars in Hollywood, such as the Jackie Chans and the Jet Lis and Zhang Ziyi, though primarily in the martial arts roles. Then you have, of course, the Oscar-winning movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Right.
But what else is going to happen that's going to result in its being a steady flow of supply for the global stage?
I think China is getting more confident. I think that's a big step forward, is they realize the world's attention is on them, and whatever they create, whatever they do, people are watching. I think, as their box office grows, as their industry grows, you'll see a confidence and creativity level sort of increase. And as that begins to happen, they'll be more outward facing. So right now, the domestic box office market is big enough for most of the players that they don't have to look outside. But again, as we become a more borderless global community, I think you'll start to see that a lot of the players in China will start to create content specifically for outside of the China market.
Well, let's hope so. Because of course, a lot of us have staked our careers on China.
Yes.
And we're waiting for that big moment when China in the entertainment industry matches up to its economic and other influence.
It's getting there. I think, again, they're importing a lot of formats right now. So they're actually paying for X Factor. They're paying for The Voice. They're paying for shows to come into the market.
But not too much, though.
Not too much, but the big brands. And I think that's a good sign, because 15 years ago, they would have just, again, had 3 judges sitting in a chair, and maybe it spun around, maybe it didn't, but that was their version of the show. But now that they're actually paying for the format and bringing it in properly, they're starting to understand there is a secret sauce behind these shows, that there is something to be learned from the producers and the creators of such programs, that hopefully that will inspire them to be able to say, okay, now it's time we create something that was born here in China, that's strong enough, that's good enough. Perhaps we can then take it to the U.S. or into other markets around the world.
That's right, and we'll probably be leading the charge on that, right?
I hope so. Hopefully.
So changing gears a little bit, and speaking more personally now, why did you choose this career?
Okay, so when I was 11, my sole mission in life was to be Oprah. And that was, I watched her all the time on television, probably not appropriate for an 11-year-old, but I did. And I've just always been fascinated by television. I've always been fascinated by the entertainment business and sort of what it means and sort of the impact and the power that it has. And that, we're storytellers. At the end of the day, our business is about storytelling. And it's about inspiring people. It's about getting them excited, whether it's television, whether it's film, whether, any of the above. It really is about storytelling. That is what we do. And, I think that's pretty exciting. It's pretty powerful. And, it can influence people, impact them, and hopefully bring some happiness and fun to someone somewhere.
I'm actually very curious, because you had the chance to choose either television production or film production.
Right.
And yet you chose television.
Yes.
If I think back to my watching of the great show Entourage,
Right.
Ari Gold and his crew always made fun of the television side of the business. The television producers were up in the valley. They didn't really have much influence. This is yet, of course, a caricature of the industry, but it does seem that there's some historical bias there. How has it worked out for you, choosing the TV side of the production industry?
Right. I love TV. I mean, I love watching movies, and there's nothing more exciting than seeing Daniel Craig as James Bond on IMAX. Like, that's stunning. But I love the TV business, and I think part of that bias comes from the glamour. So the glamour of the movie business is you get Hollywood, you get the Oscars, you get the red carpet, it's the jewelry, it's the ball gowns. Every time there's a movie premiere, you go through this whole glamour process. Television is not exactly the same. So whenever there's a new show that launches or premieres, what you have instead of the red carpet is you have executives sitting in the office poring over ratings and data, wondering how many women 18 to 45 actually watch the program and are inclined to buy the shampoo that advertised during that time slot. So it's a little bit of a different business. It's not as glamorous, but I would argue more powerful. A longer staying power, in that if you have a great show, you could be 10 seasons, which is basically 10 years out, and still be watching CSI Miami or American Idol or whatever the show is, that's been able to go that long. And again, it's part of the storytelling.
Sure.
In television, you get a chance for 13 weeks or 26 weeks, depending, but for at least 13 weeks to tell a story. Movies, it's 2 hours. Both are great. But I think TV is a little bit more impactful.
That's interesting that you said you have a lot longer to tell a story.
Yes.
So is it a more powerful medium because of the storytelling, the ability to add more details into the story over a longer period of time? Would you say?
Yes, I think television is a writer's medium. I think so writers, when they start a series to when they finish it for the season, you have a number of weeks to be able to develop the character, to create the plot, to get people vested in what's going on and the personalities of these characters that are being created. So I think television allows for that a little bit easier than film, because film is finite. You've got your 2 hours and then you're done. But then you've got season 2 coming up, and then you have season 3 coming up.
Right.
So in television, I think you get a much longer runway to be able to tell the story.
You and I both got started in the U.S. in this industry. Then were transplanted to Asia.
Yes.
If others out there in the audience were looking to break into this industry, is that the advice you would give? Go to the U.S. where the world-class talent still exists and learn something and come back out.
I think if you're given the chance to, it's a great training ground. Like you said, Hollywood is still the standard. It is still what's considered the center of the entertainment universe for the world. And best standard practices, how deals are done, how rights are carved up, how to value IP, all of that, I think a lot of it comes from the U.S. for the time being. So if given the chance, training there and learning what goes on and then being able to bring some of that knowledge back here to Asia will only help the ecosystem out here, and that's a fantastic thing. That's really what we need in the market right now.
Specifically on the creative side, because that's where you're from, how would you suggest somebody break into that side of the business?
I think get your foot in the door, as an intern, as a production assistant, as an assistant, as anything that you can just to get involved and to get started, because you ultimately can grow from there and work your way up from there. I was very lucky. I started at William Morris in the mailroom and sort of worked my way up and got to see the entire process. I was also very fortunate. I had a lot of mentors, and who came in at particular times in my career to sort of give me that guidance. So that helps as well. But I think, on the creative side is just get your foot in the door and get started,
Right.
which may be kind of different, I guess, on the business side for you.
Yeah, on the business side as well, there are very, very few jobs available, entry-level jobs.
Right.
And so I would give everybody the advice of just take whatever job you're given and try to maneuver around from there. Okay? And in my case, I broke into the industry because I was a financial analyst at a real estate development company in Taiwan, of all places, and they just happened to be working on a theme park development. When Disney saw that on my resume, they said, well, we're looking for a strategic planner in the theme parks division, so why don't you come work for us? After a few years in the dot-com sector, Warner Brothers came calling and said, well, we see Disney on the resume, but we're hiring for our television group, but we also see the dot-com experience, and we need to understand what our new bosses at AOL are talking about.
Right.
And the rest is history.
Sure.
So as you can see, it's all about getting in
Right.
and then making some pivots around functional areas and sectors within the industry.
Exactly.
I would also recommend that if an opportunity doesn't come available immediately in the sector, you should go get some good functional experience in other adjacent sectors. Get some, for instance, marketing is a very, very important skill and function within the industry. As we all know, some critically failed movies and TV shows ultimately became hits because of clever marketing campaigns.
Sure.
Right? So if you go work at a P&G for a few years, you can always sell that experience back into the industry.
Yep.
I know we talked, we're coming close to our time limit, so I wanted to kind of wrap by coming back to a theme that we always talked about here, storytelling. Entertainment is fundamentally about storytelling. It's one of the most basic human activities. Even 30,000 years ago, cavemen were drawing on the walls some basic stories.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, they were.
As Asian entertainment continues to grow in prominence, Asian stories and storytelling techniques will be added to the World Cultural Heritage pot. And I really welcome everybody to help us join in this mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.